Hi, it's Pastor Chris, coming to you from the playground in the back of the sanctuary. And I'm coming to you today to talk about some changes that we're making to worship, some experiments that we are trying starting this Sunday, January 11th, and carrying us through at least until the beginning of Lent, and maybe even further than that. And the big change, the big experiment, is that we are going to try worshiping without the bulletin. This guy, this few pages that has the order of worship and some announcements and things like that in it. And I want to explain why we are doing that. There are two big reasons. The first is agility. So here's a fact about bulletins. They have to be printed. And they're usually printed pretty early in the week. And of course, we can reprint them later in the week and refold them and redo all of the work. But once they're printed, at a certain point, they're kind of set and hard to change. So if something comes up on Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning, we're stuck either keeping with the bulletin or throwing it out anyway and doing something else. Not having the bulletin means we're not tied to whatever was printed. And by using the slides at the front of the sanctuary as our main way of kind of knowing what's happening as we go through worship, well, we can make changes on Sunday morning. We can make changes during worship if we want to. So we can be really agile. We can change, we can pivot, we can move, and we don't have to worry about the paper and ink and time that we are throwing out when we go off the bulletin. The second reason is kind of related, and that's flexibility. I know that sounds really similar to agility, but stay with me here. Another little fact about bulletins is bulletin pages come in multiples of 4 to start with, and then with inserts we can add 2. So kind of the minimum number of pages that a bulletin can be, because it's folded like this, is 4 pages. And then it can be 6 pages with a bulletin or with an insert, or it can be 8 pages, or it can be 10 pages, or it can be whatever. And we can leave pages blank and all that to kind of work out other counts. But the point is that our way of worshiping is kind of tied to the physicality of these pieces of paper. And you may have noticed that means when we have something special going on in worship, when we have a mission moment or the lighting of Advent candles or confirmation or a baptism or a new member's Sunday or a blessing of the animals or whatever, things can start getting kind of weird with the bulletin. Like layouts change and can get confusing and all sorts of things. The point is, by having bulletins, we're tied to the physicality of the bulletin. By abandoning the bulletin, by giving it up, by putting it aside, we're no longer tied to that physicality. Worship can take whatever shape we want it to. We can add bits and rearrange bits and change things, and we don't have to worry about reformatting anything at all. So those are kind of the two big reasons, this agility and this flexibility, this ability to change, either in the moment or planned out without being tied to a bulletin, without being tied to something physical. And this ability to let worship take shape in a variety of different ways. Now, there's a third reason, and this is the least important reason, but it's still kind of important, at least to me. For the last year and a few months, I have been the pastor of the church and the communications manager of the church and the secretary of the church and the administrator of the church and doing all of this stuff. And that means I've got a lot of my bandwidth, a lot of that mental space just being filled up with getting through the week. And the bulletin might be a little thing, but sometimes when your bandwidth is all taken up, when your energy is all taken up, when your time is all taken up, getting rid of a little thing can make a big difference. And so I'm hoping that by not having to worry about this every week, I'll be able to focus on some other things. Now, that might include doing some new things, but it's also going to include just spending time on some of the other stuff that I'm already doing and giving it the time that it really deserves, not rushing from one thing to the next so I've got time to fit this in somewhere, but taking the time to make sure that the slides are correct and match the words in the hymnals, being able to spend additional time visiting our members at home, being able to spend a little more effort and a little more energy on things like the website and social media, all of that kind of stuff. Sometimes, like I said, getting rid of one little thing can open up a bunch of space for possibility. Now, because we won't have the bulletin, the shape of worship will change just a little bit. We won't have as much responsive stuff like calls to worship and responsive benedictions. We won't have as much of that stuff as we've had in the past, at least to start. But as we get used to things, we might bring those back sometimes. And for big special events like Easter and Christmas Eve and that sort of thing, we can still have the bulletins and make the special stuff. But we just won't do it all the time. And our norm, at least for the next little while, will be no bulletin. And we'll see what happens. But my real hope is that that's going to open up all of these possibilities for worship and breathe some life back into worship as we learn how to shift and change and have things be a little bit different from week to week, as we learn to be surprised by how God is still speaking on Sunday mornings. So, I hope you will join me in this experiment with open hearts and open minds and see the possibilities that might come from it. I also hope that you'll give me some feedback as we move forward, and we'll see how we can work things out in a good way to continue to meet our needs on Sunday morning, but to be more agile, more flexible, and give our pastor a little bit more grace to do the work of being your pastor. So come and join us this Sunday, January 11th, as we try this experiment, as we start this experiment, and stick with us as we keep going. I look forward to seeing how one little change might open up all sorts of possibilities for First Congregational United Church of Christ.